The new expansion Triumphant Light just dropped, and I wanted to show you some new cool deck lists, but there are no new cool deck lists that emerged, so I'm gonna tell you instead as to exactly why that is. And that is because this expansion brought us only like pretty bad, or at least very mediocre cards. Like, there will be deck lists that already exist that will be a tiny little bit altered, if even that, and that's all about it. So let's take a look first at all the EX Pokemon and talk about them. Starting off with Garchomp EX, that's a stage 2 with 170 HP and it's fighting type. It has 2 attacks. For 1 energy it can deal 50 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon, and for 3 energy it does 100 damage. So why is that extremely bad? First of all, an attack for 1 energy, yeah, it is good to have, but it doesn't really make any sense, and 50 damage for stage 2 is still very underwhelming. We have snipers in this game that do exactly that and are not stage 2s. So then we have a second attack for 3 energy, it deals 100 damage. That is like very pathetic for a stage 2, and the way you should look at it is that it doesn't even one-shot most basic Pokemon in this game, right? It even with combined with Cynthia, he would deal 150 damage, right? That even wouldn't one-shot my Darkrai, which has a 160 HP if I slap a Giant Cape onto it, and every Darkrai deck plays Giant Cape, right? So this is a stage 2 for 3 energy, and a supporter doesn't even one-shot a basic Pokemon, right? If you let that fact sink in, you all will already realize how completely garbage this Garchomp is. But there's of course more, and that is he has a weakness to grass, right? Aside from him being fighting type, and fighting type doesn't have any energy acceleration, etc. So that doesn't help either. But yeah, the grass weakness is a very big thing. For stage 2 with 170 HP, the weakness actually matters, and grass is on top of the meta. Executor, spoiler alert, will remain on the very top of the meta. It is already there, and it might even get better. So having a grass weakness is detrimental. And that combined with everything else, the mediocre damage, even combined with Cynthia, which is his best support, and he doesn't even one-shot the basic, yeah, this thing will never see any competitive success whatsoever. And that's your first EX Pokemon from this expansion. Yeah, just thrown in the bin, you know? So let's continue and talk about the EVs and start off with Glaceon EX. Now this is a stage 1, water type with 140 HP, and it has an ability that says during Pokemon checkup, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, do 10 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon, and it has an attack for 3 energy, 2 water and a colorless, that deals 90 damage. So why is this thing trash? First of all, let's talk about the ability, and just in case you're wondering what Pokemon Checkup means, that is something that happens before each player's turn, and it means that the Pokemon, the both actives, will be checked for special conditions like burn, poison, etc. You get it, right? So what that tells you is that it deals 10 damage when you end your turn, and it deals 10 damage when it is your turn, right? So that equals, if Glaceon stays in the active, to 20 damage each turn to your opponent's active Pokemon. It just means that your opponent receives that 10 damage every time without him being able to do anything about it, you know? That's all that Pokemon Checkup means, really. And so yeah, the attack so that ability is already, it's not bad, but it's mediocre at best. Then this attack deals 90 damage for 3, Starmie EX does that for 2, and Starmie EX doesn't have a retreat cost, which Glaceon has. So yeah, Starmie EX is the card that Glaceon EX competes with. And you can decide for yourself, is Glaceon a little bit better than Starmie or a little bit worse than Starmie? No matter what your answer is here, you know that Starmie EX already doesn't make the cut and does not see any play in any water deck. And even if your answer is here that Glaceon EX is a little bit better, it's still not enough, and it won't make the cut into any water deck. It won't be played in Gyarados, and it won't also be played in Palkia, and therefore it is just completely useless, Palkia plays the Vaporeon, which is much more beneficial to it, and yeah, in the Gyarados deck there's no place you play the Greninja line, and Gyarados is stage 1, so there's no room left. That means Glaceon will not make the cut and will not see any play in any water deck, and therefore it's completely garbage and belongs to the bin as well. So moving on to the next evolution, which is then the Leafeon EX, and again, why is this thing bad, I'm sorry to have to say it, like, it is just the truth, so yeah, I will not sugarcoat anything. This thing is also trash. Why? Let's look at it. It's a stage 1, grass type, 140 HP as well. It has an ability that says once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, you may take a grass energy from your energy zone and attach it to one of your grass Pokemon. It has an attack for 3 energy and it deals 70 damage for 3 energy. So why it is a trash? That should be even more obvious than the Glaceon. 70 damage for 3 energy is pathetic. It's not enough. Doesn't make the cut. The ability would be kinda good if it would be done on the bench, but it is in the active spot, and you cannot have a Pokemon in the active spot that gives up 2 points and only deals 70 damage. That is never in the world gonna be worth it, even if energy acceleration is something overpowered. This one is not. It's as a stage 1 that has to be in the active and deals pathetic damage. That is never gonna be worth it. Why is that never gonna be worth it? Because you look at the best grass type deck out there and the best grass type Pokemon, and that is all about Exeggutor. Exeggutor does everything for just 1 energy. It doesn't even need the energy acceleration. Now you could use the Celebi as an argument and say, hey, Leafeon is quite decent for the Celebi, but no, also not. It is only played as a one-off in the Exeggutor deck because Exeggutor doesn't have anything that is better than the Celebi to go with, right? But Celebi will most likely be replaced, but more onto that later. So would you play a deck that contains Leafeon and Celebi and play them together? No, you wouldn't also do that, because then Superior is much more beneficial to that Celebi, right? Superior is just way better together with Celebi than the Leafeon. So you won't play it together with Celebi and you won't play it in the Exeggutor deck. What does that mean? It belongs to the bin because it will never see any play whatsoever. And that's about it. Now we only have one more EX Pokemon, if we exclude that Arceus, of course, and that EX Pokemon is Probopass. That's a metal type, stage 2 with 160 HP, and for 3 energy it deals 90 damage. And during your opponent's next turn, this Pokemon takes minus 20 damage from attacks. So yeah, we had to say that is the same story as with Glaceon, kinda. That is a stage 2 here, while Glaceon is only a stage 1, and it only has 20 more HP. That won't help it at all. It deals also 90 damage for 3 energy. That is even miles much worse than a stage 1 dealing 90 damage for 3 energy. And yeah, reducing your damage income from attacks next turn, that is like, it is so ridiculously bad. It will never see any play. That doesn't make the metal type any viable, or just it leaves me kind of speechless as to how bad this is. On top of that, it has 3 retreat costs, so if you ever put it in the active, it will just die there, and yeah, just I don't know what to say. I'm kind of speechless about how bad this is, so just please throw it away and never think about it ever again. Those are all the EX Pokemon for you, except for Arceus, but yeah, we also have to look at other good Pokemon, not only the EX Pokemon, to build a deck around. So there's barely anything that is even worth mentioning here, but there are some things. let's talk about this Tyranitar. Like if we talk about Garchomp, we also have to mention Tyranitar, so let's go over it real quick. That is obviously a stage 2, that is not an EX, it has 160 HP, it's also fighting type. And for 4 energy, it deals 130 damage. Now it has an ability though, that says if you have Arceus or Arceus EX in play, attacks used by this Pokemon do 30 damage more to your opponent's active Pokemon, which that would lead to a one-shot on pretty much everything in the game, even if there are giant capes slapped onto the Pokemon, like, you know. Yeah, I mean Palkia would survive, but the Darkrai would die, and so on and so forth. Most things get one-shot by this. That's kind of the point here, if you have an Arceus in play. Now, that is a little bit too much to ask for though, because 4 energy that are fighting type on top of that, because remember, fighting type does not have any way to accelerate energy. So this thing would become active at turn 4, and in such a fast-paced game as Pokemon TCG Pocket, having the first thing you do, the first damage you deal at turn 4, that is just much too slow. Like you will have lost the game before you can even do anything, you know. And it has to be played together with Arceus, which Arceus is also not a good starter. That thing also needs 3 energy to even think about doing anything whatsoever, you know. So now, yeah, you could pair it with whatever you want. You could pair it with something that would buy you time, like a Druddigon or something. You could play a Marshadow or a Hitmonlee or whatever you come up with that you slap into this deck to maybe help it out a little bit. It doesn't matter. You will always be, no matter what, too slow, and you will lose the game before Arceus or Tyranitar will ever get to attack, you know. You will never have any room to attach any energy to something else other than this Tyranitar. It needs 4, and this is way too much investment, you know. You could argue, like, if this thing gets going, it's pretty nuts, and that is totally correct. But it will never get going. That's the whole point here. So you can have as much potential, quote unquote, potential as you want. If that potential never comes to fruition, then that potential doesn't matter, right? So that's why Tyranitar is complete garbage, and also like unplayable. You could really fairly say that thing is unplayable, and that's why it belongs into the bin. Let's leave it at that and move on to the last Pokemon that I want to mention here, and that is Crobat. Crobat at first glance looks kinda interesting, but you will realize something here. So yeah, let's go over it. This is stage 2 with 110 HP and it's dark type. It has a very interesting ability that says, once during your turn, if you have Arceus or Arceus EX in play, you can deal 30 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. Then it has an attack for 1 energy and it deals 50 damage. So yeah, you never want this in the active, and you never want to attack with it, right? Only if you have like no other option, and since it has no retreat cost, maybe you can like tank an attack, but that's never something you want, you know. So it's all about that ability. You want to have Crobat on your bench and use that ability. Now there are obvious issues. First of all, of course, you have to have Arceus or Arceus EX in play. That's already kind of a bummer. But to then only deal that 30 damage to the active Pokemon and not to anything that you want, this will never see any play whatsoever. And that is because of the very simple reason that Greninja just outclasses this Crobat in any way that you could possibly come up with. Not only does Greninja has more HP, it's just 10, but I mean still, right? It doesn't need to have an Arceus or an Arceus EX in play, and it can deal its 20 damage to whatever the fuck it wants. It is not limited to just the opponent's active Pokemon, you know? So yeah, Crobat is very limited and has very specific conditions that you have to fulfill in order to use this attack, like the in order to use this ability. Like, the ability is not completely garbage and unplayable, but still it's very, very mediocre at best, because you are just limited to the active Pokemon. You cannot snipe anything with it, and it makes it kind of unplayable, honestly, because why would you ever play this over Greninja? There is never a reason in the world, you know? So yeah, forget about Crobat, honestly. So those were all the Pokemon that are, you know, at least worth a mention, you know? Now we have some trainer cards, and yeah, you can already hear me laughing. It's very, 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 very pathetic. We only got 4 new trainer cards out of almost 100 cards that got reviewed, only for whatever, right? That's not the point of this video. And yeah, let's go over those trainer cards real quick. We have this one here. This is a supporter. It's called Celestic Town Elder, and what it does is put one random basic Pokemon from your discard pile into your hand. If you think about this now, what would you use it with? What basic Pokemon would you want to grab out of your discard pile and put it into your hand with this? Yeah, you tell me. To me personally, this is just introduced to help Arceus out a little bit, and just in case you have to use Arceus as a wall and it dies, but you need it back into your hand, and just in case you don't draw into the second one, you can pull it back from your discard pile to then put it put it into play again to enable an ability of another Pokemon. Like, that's the only way I see this. I see this being reasonable, you know? So way too specific, way too niche, and even if you fulfill this little tiny niche that it has, it's nothing too impressive. It will never make the cut. I'm calling it right here. This thing will never make the cut. It's way too specific, way too niche, and even then, it's not even that great. So moving on to Barry. He says during this turn, attacks used by your Snorlax, Heracross and Staraptor cost 2 less colorless energy. Now, the only thing that this would ever be used with in the first place, that would be Heracross, but you will realize that Heracross is already heavily outclassed by Carnivine. More into that in a second. And that's why this card is completely useless. Snorlax and Staraptor are 100% unplayable, and as I said, Heracross is already like completely outclassed in what it does in every way, shape or form, so forget about Barry and throw him away. And then moving on to the last, kind of the last supporter, you know, you get the drill. So this is Adaman. What he says, during your opponent's next turn, all of your metal type Pokemon take 20 less damage from attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. Why is this completely unplayable garbage? Because there's no viable metal deck out there that doesn't exist, so Adaman also doesn't exist. There's no usage for this card whatsoever, no matter how you spin it. So there you go. Then we have the only supporter that will be viable and that will be played in every single water deck, and that is Irida. She heals 40 damage from each of your Pokemon that has any water energy attached to it. So this is automatically a staple in every single water deck out there. No matter if you play Palkia or Gyarados or whatever water deck you play Irida. And yeah, that's the only good supporter that this expansion brought us, and it is limited to water decks because no other deck will generate water energy. So there you go, that's about it. Now let's talk about one new deck list, quote unquote. It's not a new deck. Yeah, I mean the deck list is kind of new, but the deck isn't. Let's talk about it. And as you would have probably already guessed, there will be some new deck that emerges because of Arceus. That is what this whole expansion is kind of based around, you know. So there we go. This is the best deck that you can possibly build, including in Arceus. If Arceus will even be viable at all, that still remains to be seen. But if anything out of this expansion will be viable, then it will be Arceus. and this is it. You played with Carnivine, which for 1 grass energy it deals 20 damage, but if you have an Arceus or an Arceus EX in play, it deals 50. And this is how you want to start off with this deck. You want to have Carnivine in the active and an Arceus on the bench to then go nuts immediately and deal 50 damage each turn from your first turn onwards. And that hopefully buys you enough time to then draw into that execute and into the executor and have them ready just in case Carnivine either dies or you will retreat it. And as soon as you have that executor ready, you will put it into the active and go nuts with it. Carnivine is only there to apply early pressure and maybe buy you a turn or two to get that executor ready, so you come out of the gate swinging. But you can already see the problem. It is but that is not a problem, because it doesn't count, as this is the case for every single deck that ever existed in this game, and we do not get any solution to this. So it is extremely dependent on how you draw. If you do not draw into Arceus and Carnivine at the beginning, then what are you gonna do, right? You cannot start the game off with Arceus, as he's only here to get that Carnivine ready, right? To unlock this Carnivine's ability. He will never be able to attack because he needs 3 energy to do anything. And even then, you require a full bench, kind of, otherwise your attack is just absolutely garbage. He gives up 2 there are lots of issues here, but this is an issue that every single deck in the game has and will ever have, unless we get proper search engines and better draw engines and more draw engines. So you're heavily reliant on draws, such as any other deck. But you can also, if you get a little bit lucky, come out of the gate swinging very, very hard, and this tech is probably gonna be better than the Celebi tech. And that's about it. You know everything about Executor already, and now the tech, if you want to make Arceus somewhat viable, then this is it. There's no other way. Everything else that you would pair with Arceus is just too bad, It is sad that it is that way, but that's the reality of the situation. You will see. So if you play Arceus, play this. Barely. I don't think I need to mention the other cards in this deck. Let's go over them anyways real quick. So Pokeball Professor's Research, every deck plays them, you know why. Pokemon Communication, of course, every deck that plays that is so reliant on having a combination of cards such as Carnivine and Arceus, and on top of that you play a stage 1 evolution line that you heavily rely on as well. So Pokemon Communication is a must-have. Then Erica, no need to explain you why. Every Executor deck always plays the Erica. If you play a grass deck, then you play Erica. That's just how it is. Executor is very, very tanky. It loves a giant cape, it loves the Rocky Helmet, and it has 160 HP for just a stage 1, which is already amazing. But on top of that, it also has Erica. So Rocky Helmet and giant cape just buff him even more, and he loves these cards, and that's why they are here. You play 1 copy of Giant Cape, 1 Rocky Helmet. Furthermore, we have Leaf. Obvious, you need to be able to retreat that Arceus, and it also helps you retreat Executor just in case you would need to do that or want to do that, whatever. So Leaf is it enables you to retreat your Pokemon, right? I mean, obvious, everyone knows about that. And that's about it. Of course, don't get me wrong, there are a few more cards here, not many, but tiny little bit more cards that will be tagged into other deck lists and alter them a little bit, but more onto that in my next video probably. So as soon as tournaments results are there, I will grab the data from them and I will make sure that this gets analyzed by people that exactly know how to do that, and then I will present you the data and give you the first iteration of whatever the meta might turn out to be. If you want my prediction, the meta is not going to change in any way, shape or form. This is the most drastic change to the meta that you will see, and that is very, very underwhelming. But yeah, as I said, every single card pretty much from this expansion just sucks and it's not good enough. So we will see what happens. I will keep you up to date with the meta. And and all the news, I will cover everything about Pokemon TCG Pocket. So if you like that kind of content, news and meta coverage, decklist coverage, talks, you know, anything. If you like Pokemon TCG Pocket content in general, please consider leaving a follow on my channel. I would really appreciate it. But until next time, take care of yourselves, have a great day, and bye bye.